Welcome back to The Edge. Hey, we're on the trail of offline conversions for your paid ad marketing. Learning more about your campaigns and really what to watch for, you should be using Google Tag Manager, and we're going to be talking about that with Tim Jenson from Clix today on The Edge.
Your weekly digital marketing trends with industry trend-setting guests. You're listening and watching Edge of the Web. Winners of Best Podcast from the Content Marketing Institute for 2017. Hear and see more at edgeofthewebradio.com. Now, here's your host, Aaron Sparks.
All right, hey, this is Edge of the Web Radio, episode 338. I'm your host, Aaron Sparks. Do I look puffy? Do I look puffy? Jacob, do I look puffy?
I've heard you today.
Yeah.
Definitely been a long day. We made it here, though, right?
We are here. It's a Monday, and if you can't tell from my voice, I am a bit under the weather, and you know what? It's becoming a regularity. It's kind of pissing me off now.
Well, drink more orange juice. I don't.
Come on, give me something more. Come on.
I'm not sure what's antihistamines.
I want some good holistic medicine. So if you're on the live channel, jump in there with some comments. Let me know what I should be doing to get rid of this cold. Maybe we'll actually do some stuff while we're doing the show. How about that? Every week we bring you amazing guests to chat with regarding trending digital marketing news and topics. We unpack key marketing topics for our digital marketing audience. We've been doing this for 9 years, and thank you so much to our listeners who have been with us the entire time. You want to check out the entire show over at edgeofthewebradio.com. That's edgeofthewebradio.com. If you are new to the show, welcome. Here's the ropes of the show, so to speak, is that every week we actually start our podcast creation with a live broadcast on YouTube. So if you want to jump over to youtube.com/edge of the web, you'll be able to jump into our stream and hit the bell. Make sure that you get notified whenever we do go live, because we want to participate with you right then and there and field some questions from our audience. You can find our podcast on all the different spaces: iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Spotify, TuneIn, Player FM, and a handful of others. If we're not where you listen to podcasts, let us know over at info@edgeofthewebradio.com, and we'll certainly get our feed over to you. Over on the site, you've got the show notes for each and every interview that we do, as well as some show articles, transcripts, and much more. So make it part of the consumption of the show to jump over to the website, because we got a lot of good stuff to deliver there as well. And on top of it, certainly want to jump into the newsletter that we've got each and every week that covers the show that we did, the interview of the guests, some key points, some key takeaways, as well as the news items of the day. All this for your digital marketing consumption. Edge of the Web is actually sponsored by Site Strategics, the title sponsor of the show. The pioneers in the agile digital marketing. Their core specialties are SEO, technical SEO, social media, conversion rate optimization, web development, omni-channel media, all the buzzwords. We do them all. But we actually focus on results-based marketing. How about that? So we'll actually change and go agile based on those precepts of what we're trying to hit, as opposed to just set it and forget it methodologies that some other agencies may do. So if you're interested in what we can do for you, we'll give a free hour consultation online or in office. Just give us a call, 877-SEO for web, 877-736-4932. Can you tell that the drugs are starting to kick in now?
Definitely.
All right, so the man in the booth is Jacob Mann. He's the studio creative director. How are you doing today, sir?
Much better than you.
Wow, that's a judgment call, isn't it?
Well, like I said, I've heard the sniffles.
Yeah. It's been.
I've been where you are. I'm glad I'm not there today.
Yeah, it's pretty scratchy. I've been talking all day too. Haven't I?
Yeah. We've talked about it before. It's I blame the kids always.
Absolutely. We have to blame the kids because they can't defend themselves.
Yes. And they don't watch this show.
No, they don't. I've tried to get them to. There's a screaming, almost like the Silence of the Lambs type of scream if Dad brings his show into the household.
Right.
Hey, over there, and she's not going to say anything because she's busy doing something. It's Allie Coons, assistant producer for the show. Wave. And then she can actually say something. She's still not going to. You got to get a mic on her. She's doing so much for the show, she has to contribute at some point in time. All right, so some housekeeping notes for the show. Just want to make sure you know who's coming up in the next few episodes. You got Jay Akunzo on his third time on the show. He must be a glutton for punishment. That's going to be the 20th of January. We have Dawn Anderson coming on the 27th, and Kim Scott, I believe, on February 3rd. Yep. All righty. And we got a few more coming our way. So we're getting slated for 2020. And if you're interested in coming on the show, give us a call or contact us on info@edgeofthewebradio.com. And if you want us to talk to somebody, if you would like us to interview somebody, we haven't yet, just give us a shout. Let us know. We certainly would appreciate your feedback as we do the shows each and every week. Set your reminders on YouTube to get notified when we go live with those shows. And that's part of it, is be able to have a live interaction with our audience. So it's 3:00 on Monday. What else are you going to do, right? I mean, you're still suffering from the weekend. Jump in, get your work done. Have a calm 3:00 evening, and just join us on the show.
I'm certainly never working.
Absolutely, I know. No, hey, this is education, right? It could be considered training, right?
Yeah, no, it's good for that. There's information every week, and it kind of it's not hyper focused on just one thing. So it's good to move around and get all the different.
We are
parts
diversified.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the show. Housekeeping. Let's go get the digital marketing news of this week.
I was very excited to start my reportings.
This week's trending topics.
Alrighty, so welcome to the Site Strategics Digital Marketing News Desk. This is the bonus news podcast and video for Edge of the Web Radio, episode 338. I'm your host, Aaron Sparks, the CEO of Site Strategics, and joining me this week is Tim Jenson, campaign manager over at Clix Marketing. Tim, how you doing, sir?
I am doing well. Also, just getting over a cold, and also blame the kids like you guys, but yeah, otherwise doing well.
Yeah, I was going to say, aren't you glad you're not in this booth, as I'm the roaming contagion over here? But
infection booth.
They've locked the doors.
I was going to say, we haven't told you yet,
right?
but we actually, we locked it down. So we left some food in the corner. We'll see you tomorrow.
All right, fantastic. It's probably the safest call. Well, Tim, we certainly want to welcome you to the show, and we've got a lot to talk about whenever we get into GTM and different things to track inside of Google Analytics, and we always like to have the how-to shows and some practical application here. But news never stops, and we certainly have a couple articles that we want to jump into. So, Tim, are you ready to take a swing at these?
Sure thing.
All right. So our first article on the deck is from Search Engine Land over at by Jenny Marvin, and we picked a few articles just because Tim is so far in the business PPC space. I want to tee up a couple things for him. Microsoft Advertising's Promote IQ integration for retailers and brands is now in beta. So this is an on-site search product. Microsoft Bing for Commerce is also becoming available for retailers, not realtors. Why would you do that? All right, so if you don't know what Promote IQ is, Tim, tell us what that is.
Sure. Sorry, I didn't fully prep for.
No, it's all right. It's all right. Sorry. Let me hang you out there.
Yeah. So first of all, full disclosure, I'm more of a lead gen guy. I've barely touched e-commerce.
No worries.
So yeah. So
all right. So let's pull this back around here. Sorry about that. The deal of Promote IQ is Microsoft has rolled out an engine of sorts that you can actually roll out onto your own e-commerce website for sites that are looking to build out, spin up an advertising engine. So instead of actually trying to set up your own, and there's so many complexities in that, Microsoft now has this Promote IQ product, which is a commerce marketing platform. It enables retailers to build out and control their own digital vendor marketing programs for brands selling on their sites. And I guarantee it's going to tie into programmatics as well from a larger brokerage environment here. So retailers can actually configure a broad range of native ad placements So it's also probably inserting directly into the DOM and the build out of the page in appropriate places where that ad's going to get the best exposure. Through this Promote IQ dashboard, the platform also allows retailers to customize programs targeting inventory of individual brand partners, as well as it provides a white label dashboard where not only yourself as the management, but you can also provide a dashboard for your advertisers to be able to log in and see how their ads are running on your e-commerce advertising site. All right, so that's the entire skinny of this thing. What do you think about the deployment of this type of engine over e-commerce platforms? I mean, it's high time that we have something a bit more stable than spinning up our own advertising engines ourselves, right?
Sure. And I think another big factor to look at is the fact that it is on Microsoft. I think that's an underutilized platform and something I always preach to clients. So it certainly speaks to the value. If you're not using Microsoft ads, at least try it out, because I definitely see them continuing to build out new features like this.
No, absolutely. And Ginny, actually, they over search engine land, they also roll out a nice piece of each and every one of their pages of content regarding, why do we care? Well, the fact of the matter is that a lot of websites like Walmart, for example, they're building their platforms now in-house. So there's, for the large organizations that have that type of manpower, they're building in their own e-commerce platforms. I should say not e-commerce, but their ad engine platforms and display network platforms. So Microsoft rolling this out actually does give that smaller or maybe a larger set of e-commerce sites that don't have the funds or the manpower to capitalize on something that is state-of-the-art and enterprise-level type of ad delivery. That's a niche place that Google hasn't played yet, and we strongly recommend jumping into Microsoft ads in their own right. But this could very well be a good play by Microsoft in a space that was needing a stable brand. I'm going to take a lozenge now. Another article over at Marketing Land by Kirk Williams, who's a friend of the show. 4 things shopping ad managers need to prepare for in 2020. So along the same vein as in our paid marketing space, I'm going to ask Tim to jump in on a couple of these points here. One out of the gate here that I need a little bit more information on is Smart Shopping Campaigns, SSC. It's the automation inside of Google. Now, there's been a good deal of adoption of automation, but at the same time, there are a lot of reticent players that don't really trust Google to be able to automate their marketing dollars. So, Tim, what do you think about that particular concept?
Sure. Again, adding the caveat that I've barely touched e-commerce, but certainly do have an opinion of the smart features in general. I know Kirk, I've heard Kirk speak about his take on this issue. So I know smart shopping in particular is definitely pushing the mindset that Google can basically control your campaign from start to finish, give you very little optimization data, and just hand it to you and say, okay, trust us, with a very little control to make tweaks. Right. So I will say over the past couple of years, I've been slowly working in some aspects of automation, slowly trusting more as I carefully test it. But still the concept of handing full reins to Google, I mean, based on what I see them doing as far as what they're prioritizing bid-wise or even queries that they're matching automatically, it's still not trustworthy, particularly for niche products. So again, it's something they're definitely pushing in that direction. So Absolutely. If you're completely just, I'm going to manage everything myself and not test any of these features, you're going to be kind of left in the dark as they take away more control. But at the same time, it's not time to just hand over full reins to Google.
No, absolutely not. And especially with the mature, I mean, these engines aren't mature yet. I mean, we're just starting to have these tool sets provided to us. Now they want us to dive in, but at least have a subset of your advertising utilize that. Don't go hog wild and hole in, right? Because the navigation is just not there. I'm just concerned about garbage in, garbage out method.
Exactly. Yes.
If my campaign is not fully matured, or if I haven't distinguished key factors for the machine learning to be able to pick up on of what constitutes a conversion, for example, or what constitutes a number of different factors to measure by, then it's just going to steer by what's default out of the box, and that's not valuable for most sites that do have a fingerprint of conversions outside of just the lead gen, right?
Yes, and that is an issue that you hit on, where essentially they're looking at, every conversion is the same, or everything they got the same amount of revenue is the same, not factoring in quality factors that you might have outside data about, or lifetime customer value, that sort of thing.
It's high time for us to catch up to ourselves and figure out how best to paint the picture, and then, only then, dial in some automation. I'm a bit gun shy of it, as you can tell. A couple other key points in this article: international shopping, certainly getting global. But one key thing we've talked about on the show, and I think even Kirk brought it up last time he was on, is the feed-free product data. And I realize that you're not in e-commerce, Tim, but actually being able to tee up inside of our site structured data that's actually going to be scooped up by e-commerce advertising. We're now in the space where Google is paying attention to every page of product that we have and getting insights into those products from what we can control on our site. So if you're not doing any type of product schema markup, oh my Lord, you need to be doing that, because that's the rich tapestry that Google's actually going to pull from to match that customer's intent to a much greater degree than headlines or your XML feed. Any thoughts on that matter?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, from the bit that I have played with, liking shopping feeds and the details you have to put in there, it certainly does seem like a time saver. But on the other hand, you have to make sure your site is actually set up for it, so that's some extra work for people to take into account too.
You better believe it. Better believe it. And his final point was actually getting automated in Bing as well with the smart shopping ads. So these are all quite cutting edge points when it comes down to e-commerce and in the shopping space. Third article is over there. Hey, guess what? The third article is from Tim Jenson himself.
Hopefully I can speak to this one.
We're going to have a problem if you can't. All right. So from Search Engine Journal, and I wanted to tee this up because this is kind of the framework of the entire conversation today.
Sure.
How to track offline conversions in Microsoft advertising. Now, previously, Tim actually wrote about how to track offline conversions in Google Ads, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth today. But importing data from outside sources such as phone calls and CRMs, all these things are must-haves whenever you're getting a full picture of behavior on your website. So, Tim, give us some thoughts on the integration of offline when it comes to Microsoft Ads.
Sure. I mean, I think it's one thing that advertisers don't often think of when they're setting up accounts. They're thinking of, what can I track on my website? Like someone filling out a form. And there's often a lot of outside data that you're missing. Like phone calls, for example, it might be obvious if you're running like a local service industry business, like a heating company where half of your leads come from calls, but it could even be you're selling B2B software or the real estate or whatever, where phone calls may still be a factor.
Yep.
And you need to be factoring those in. So that is something where either you can link a third-party source or you can upload that data after the fact. I'm just saying phone calls because I have a company or have a client who does tech support, and they use a phone tracking platform that doesn't actually integrate with Microsoft Advertising.
Oh.
But we were able to upload the data using the offline conversion import by exporting it, formatting in a spreadsheet, uploading it, and there are some third-party providers that can help with it. So just definitely helpful to think of any other data points you can get in there, even some less obvious conversion points. And it's fairly easy if you have a CRM or other platform you can export it from, and there are some other services out there that can help you integrate too.
No, absolutely. The question of, and we'll get into this more on the other side into the full podcast, but just the question of innate value of offline conversions as opposed to lead gen conversions, online conversions. That's something that there's a bit of has a mystique to it, but it's also a bit of a myth that there's such a lesser value to these offline conversions. That couldn't be further from the case, right?
Sure. And I think another point too is offline doesn't technically mean that it didn't happen on the internet.
Yep.
It just means it's not something you can track by default on the platform.
Right.
So one big use for this can be data that you have from your CRM.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have someone who submits a lead, your initial point of contact, but then you mark that this person actually bought your service 2 months later. And if you still have that Microsoft Click ID, you can upload that as another conversion point. So you can track not only the keywords that led to people submitting a form, but then the keywords that led to people who actually became customers.
And that's incredibly powerful as well. All right. So we certainly recommend everybody checking out these articles and the authors and giving them some comments. We certainly appreciate that news article as well because it teed up very nicely to what we were about to talk about. So that's the news for the day. Hey, if you're actually if you're interested in getting search traffic and getting a good analysis on your search traffic, which I think everybody on this who's listening to the show would want to do, hey, jump over to Ahrefs. It's ahrefs.com. We certainly appreciate their continued sponsoring of Edge of the Web. Ahrefs makes competition. Boy, I can barely get this one out. Very, very easy to actually drill down into. You can see the keywords. You can see what pages of your competitors are getting the most traffic, what they're ranking for, as well as being able to see all the inbound factors that are promoting those pages. You can see the pages, the content, and be able to see exact words that are ranking and build your content strategy against that. The tools are fantastic. So some great tools when it comes down to link intersect of your competitors, so you can see exactly what you need to go after to be able to jump into that commonality ring with your competitors. They also have a great site audit tool that shows internal resource and external pages analysis on that tool set. So jump over to ahrefs.com and start a free trial today. You're going to swim in great data just like we do over at Site Strategics. All right. That's the news for the day. Now let's meet this week's industry's expert guest.
Now it's time for Edge of the Web featured interview with Tim Jenson, campaign manager at Clix Marketing.
All right, so we're back to our full podcast here, episode 338. Certainly appreciate Tim's jumping in there with our different news items. Sorry, Tim, that I threw a couple e-commerce. You told us actually before the show you don't work in that space, and it just dawned on me. Probably should have used a couple other articles, but all things good. Let's introduce our guest to our audience. Tim Jenson is a campaign manager over at Clix Marketing, over 8 years of experience in digital marketing. Tim has actually worked in both B2B and B2C accounts in a variety of different industries. He's comfortable managing ads on all the major platforms, but he's also intrigued with crossover between analytics and PPC. And in that space, I certainly do want to bring him on board here and talk about this because there's a gap sometimes in the PPC analytics space, isn't there, Tim?
Yes, totally agreed. I would say most people who've been doing PPC for a while have a decent grasp of analytics, but as far as in-depth knowledge of even how Google Analytics actually tracks certain metrics and even some of the nuances of what those are and aren't is lacking, as well as some of the deep dive in the data, some of the setup of tracking, which, let's face it, if you don't have your tracking set up properly, then you're getting bad data and you might not be managing your campaigns properly.
Absolutely. So before we dive into that, give us a little bit of backstory. How did you come to be at Clix and inside this particular unique space of PPC and analytics matchup?
Sure. So I started in an agency, full service agency, about 10 years ago now. My bios actually date back a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Just straight out of college in a generic role. And the person who did PPC left shortly after I joined there. So just kind of get pushed into doing that, learned that that's kind of what I loved, and jumped into that. Worked for another local agency for the past 5 years. And then about 2.5 years ago, joined Clix. So pretty much have been in the digital marketing world straight out of college all the way through, and kind of found the PPC niche fairly early on. I'd say the analytics end. My previous company also did web development, so had to build out analytics, and had some clients who came in, kept asking questions like, how do we track this? How do we track this? How do we track this? So kind of something where I just dug in and learned how to do it, and got more and more intrigued with that end of things.
Excellent. So what inspired you to go PPC as opposed to perhaps a SEO?
I like the immediacy of the data that you get back, the exactness of what you're able to track. SEO, I did dabble in it early on in my career, but I would say PPC, you have more immediate control. There certainly is tons of data analysis on the SEO end, but more precise numbers and stuff to work with on the PPC. And I like the blend of, there's data involved, there's copywriting, there's understanding your market niche. There's a whole host of a variety of aspects that all kind of tie together in that world.
Oh, absolutely. No, I think your foray into PPC and analytics and getting a depth of knowledge in between those, that's something that's very, very useful for any particular specialist. But from PPC standpoint, you're literally dealing with your client's money, and you need to have as much visibility into the traffic that you're sending to that site, as opposed to maybe a little bit more intent-oriented or a little bit softer nudges that are brand nudges and what have you in different marketing executions. So I'm sure you find it very, very common sense to be able to dive into analytics with that level of ferocity. But have you seen a lot of PPC managers that really haven't even opened up or cracked the book on analytics?
I don't know that they haven't cracked the book per se, but as far as like not going beyond the
basics,
basic reports. Like some specific flaws that I'll see. I actually saw someone harping on this on LinkedIn recently, but just picking out certain stats like bounce rate, for example, and honing in just on that, when bounce rate is actually calculated like you're a bounce if you don't interact with the page. It doesn't mean that you just stayed in the page for 1 second and left. You could have stayed in the page for a minute and actually read the article and left, but you're still a bounce. So things like that, understanding nuances of how things are tracked. I don't think people always delve into that.
No, they really don't. So that's where I wanted to actually start into this particular conversation, is understanding how to get an idea around customer intent. Conversion is just not lead generation, and it shouldn't be thought of just phone calls and form fills. There's so many different dimensions to a website and behavior on a website. Just give us some run through of some of the behaviors that are part of a consumer as they digest content.
Sure. The things like you can track people landing on the page, but then things like Google Tag Manager, for example, has where you can actually set up scroll tracking to see if they're actually scrolling up and down on the page and what point they're reaching, if they're watching videos on the page, that sort of thing. There's things like the page flow report where you can see the path where, let's say you have an about page and they go to a service page and they look at a specific service and then they go to a contact page from there. That can kind of help you see if you have the process set up on your site correctly or not. I was actually just looking at a recent client site where they had 3 different product categories, and you select a specific product, you land on a page that very clearly says it's for that specific product, and then you click get a quote, and then the quote form basically takes you back to the beginning where it's like, which one of these products do you want to get a quote for? Well, you were already on that product category page. So that's where, I think that one's almost kind of obvious just looking at it, but looking at the analytics data, you might see that people are, bouncing or might be getting kind of annoyed with a form process like that. And some more, maybe not so immediately obvious things. I love looking at internal site search. If that's a feature on your site, you can see when people come to your site, what's the first thing they look for? How are they searching for your products or services that you have on your site?
Right.
That could lead into keywords that you use in the paid or even the organic end. Or it might give you some hints as to they're using one word for a product, you're using another word. Maybe you need to change your wording to what they're actually typing in there.
Those are some great trackable assets, so to speak, inside of GTM. I think the most important concept that we want to launch off into here is that a marketer and explicitly a PPC marketer, they need to be fully familiar with the site that they're advertising on. They need to be able to walk through and have a map of the user flow, what the intended user flow is, what are the assets, what are the features, the fixtures of the site that make that user experience not only worthwhile, but the things that the user is experiencing. You can start putting together kind of a user experience map from just common elements that are on every page, as well as different items that they'll be finding along their path, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially when it ties into, like, I work with a lot of B2B clients where there's a lengthy sales cycle. It's a very extensive research process.
Oh, yeah.
So there may be one section of your site where you have like white papers that people can download to learn about a product and express interest, where they might not be ready to talk to sales if all you have is just a contact form, like have a salesperson call me, where people aren't ready for that. So that's where you can kind of see the nuances of, like, for example, I have a cybersecurity client. So someone might go to a page about DDoS attacks, like common form of attacks that happen on networks. And what we'll do is we'll actually offer them a guide to mitigating DDoS attacks, but then at the same time, they can check an option to have a salesperson contact them. They can choose not to check it. Either way, they'll make it into a sequence where you'll contact them later, show them some other ads down the line, set up retargeting. So they're a little further along in the funnel there.
That's what we're talking about, is starting to put together the mousetraps that are on your site. It's tough sometimes whenever you come across advertisers that are only looking at a landing page and have that myopic perspective that if it's not falling into the funnel, then they don't want to have anything to do with it. Well, the fact of the matter is that there are so many touch points on a website, and it's not just the landing page. You've got to be able to be able to see the other experiences that they have. I mean, literally, I do it so many times. I'll go to the landing page, bounce off, jump out of that landing page to the full site, just to get an understanding, because I really don't like getting shoved into those landing forms to begin with, right? So I'm then starting to check out everything. If there's no attribution, or more importantly, if there's no campaign to be able to, there's no audience definition of what I just did there, right? Then you're losing opportunity, to say the least. So have you gone through and be able to give anybody guidance, other marketers, on what to check for on their own websites? I mean, there's so many unique variables. It's almost like every site has its own fingerprint, right?
Sure, absolutely. And I think part of what you're getting at, and I'll answer your question in a minute, obviously.
Keep on going.
But the part of what you're getting at is the fact that you can go online and search like landing page best practices, and you'll get a ton of conflicting advice where someone might tell you long form pages work the best, short form pages work the best. Have your contact form in the top. No, have a bunch of information and have that on the bottom. Use a video. Don't use a video.
Right.
And I think a lot of people will chase trends. They'll read an article just because an article said to do something, they do it, and they're not looking at the data. And that is where analytics data from your ad accounts should come into play, where instead of just going off of what an article says, you should test for yourself and see what works for you. Because I see it work very differently for different clients, and honestly, even within like different product lines, different times a year, frankly, from year to year, sometimes the same product will test different types of pages, and something we tested last year works differently.
Right.
So that's where the data kind of ties in there.
Well, another fallacy in thinking could also be just the key concept of ROI.
Yes.
Because that's very linear. That's very one-dimensional. Can you expand on what people really should be putting in place of ROI, or at least the concept of?
Sure. Yeah, it is definitely something where, particularly when you're just looking at like last touch attribution and you're trying to determine like, okay, this contact form is worth this much, so I'm only going to pay this much for a lead.
Right.
Where if you have the infrastructure set up in your CRM, where you can actually track like this person submitted a form and 2 months later they became a paying customer, or if you're a SaaS business, what's your average retention, how much value are going to get out of that person long term. So having that data point of not just like here's an initial average cost per customer, but actually understanding lifetime value.
There it is.
And how that performs, that will tie in. Another thing is to think of different stages. That's another issue I run into with clients, where they'll it kind of nail down like, I only want to spend this much per lead. Like I want to spend $10 per lead, but they're selling like a 5-figure service. Where especially for like a top of funnel asset, sure, that might be a bit cheaper, but if you're actually getting like an actual serious lead, sometimes, if we're running like LinkedIn ads, we all know how pricey those are if you played in that space.
Absolutely.
But it's really, really ultra targeted campaign. So it might be worth it to pay a few $100s per lead, even if the finance people kind of look at you twice when they see those numbers. If down the line, those people often pay off and they're seeing a huge return on those.
Kind of like audience qualification. Yeah. I mean,
yes. Yeah.
The LinkedIn audience is a heck of a lot more qualified based on your targeting than that unknown PPC lead, right?
Yeah.
So let's take one more step closer to how to track this. Pardon me. Woo. We can see a heck of a lot of behavior inside of Google Analytics out of the box, right? But some of these behaviors that we're talking about are not by default. There's a number of them. So in comes Google Tag Manager. So can you describe to our audience that perhaps hasn't experienced Google Tag Manager, what it is, how it's used, and then talk to some of the default functions inside GTM that talk to GA?
Sure. Yeah. So Google Tag Manager, or in essence, a tag manager, is a product that would work where there's one code you can add to your site, and then you can go into the UI, and from there you can deploy multiple tracking tags through that web interface after just adding that single code to your site. So let's say you're running Google ads, Microsoft advertising, Facebook ads, and each of those has a pixel that you need to install. Google Analytics has its own pixel, where before you would need to go through and add each of those manually, or sometimes that's going back and forth with a developer about all the right ways to add that. Where Google Tag Manager, once you have the main Google Tag Manager code added, you can go into the interface, you can deploy the tags, you can choose to deploy it on certain pages or after certain actions are taken. You can, if there's specific conversion tags you want to deploy, you can set those up to fire after a thank you page. A lot of sites are set up with like Ajax forms, or there's different types of forms where there's not actually a thank you page, and it stays on the same URL. Google Tag Manager, there's ways that you can pick up that a form submitted, so you can fire the conversion code, where before that was kind of a pain to track down or have to work with a developer to fire that. And on the Google Analytics end, there's a ton of potential built-in tracking, but just a couple things that are built in by default. Scroll tracking, when I mentioned briefly earlier, where you can fire an event based on the percentage that people scroll down a page. So, let's say you're promoting your blog and you can see not only how many people actually made it to the blog article, but how far they actually scrolled. Or video, if you have embedded YouTube videos, you can actually fire in data for like if people watch the video, how far they watch the video. A third thing is click tracking. So Google Analytics will only track page views for URLs that are part of your site, but you can track like if someone's clicking a link off to another site. Something like a PDF is not going to show up by default, so you can track if someone's clicking to download a PDF. If there's like a button that you want to track, so tons of potential opportunities.
So I'm going to pause you there because
sure.
that right there. No, you're good. But the PDF side of things and anything that's a downloadable. It absolutely should be tracked. Those are one of the conversion points. It's not a lead. We get that, but it absolutely is a customer intent to get something from you, and you're offering it up. And literally out of the box, Google cannot track that PDF because Google's got to run, Analytics has to run JavaScript to be able to run. So you're not embedding any of these tags, any of these things on that digital asset, but you better believe these are some wins that you can map out in your site. So it's a very easy implementation to be able to tag that particular on-click event. And you also have to have that listener element on GTM, correct?
It's kind of baked in by default. They've changed it a little bit.
They've kind of evolved
Right. But there would be a trigger that you set up to pinpoint the specific click. So you can define that a bunch of different ways. It could be like clicks on a certain URL. You can use a regex if you're familiar with that, or certain elements in the code like CSS or that sort of thing. So you can kind of make it as advanced or not advanced as you want. If you're not super code proficient, there's a ton of guides out there that will help you do some of this basic stuff.
Yep. But that's an essential point right there. If you got anything on your site that's not just a navigation to another page, if it's something that's again like your embedded video, what an incredible value to be able to see that user that hit 3 other pages also played that video to whatever set timestamp that you want to have. If they've got past a particular call to action halfway through the video, that's some great data to be able to understand that behavior, right?
Yes, and a great hack on that end, if you're in the PPC world, is that any action you can track in Google Tag Manager, you can tie to a retargeting audience.
Yep.
So Google Analytics ties directly to Google Ads, so you can make an audience with, let's say you had a event for anyone that scrolled 50% on your blog. So you could actually make an audience to retarget based on those people. So instead of retargeting everyone that visits your blog and including the people who just bounced off and didn't want to read anything, you can choose to only target the people who actually took some time to scroll down and they're probably a little more interested.
Absolutely, and you did start the conversation with the concept of a bounce. There's so many different behaviors on a page that you could track from a user. Scrollable demarcations should absolutely be something because that's consuming it, and everybody consumes at a different speed. Obviously, I'll actually scroll through and I'll highlight words as I read them. That's just a behavior I've got, but I'll slowly consume it. But if you hit that particular mark on the page, right, and perhaps there is even nearby a call to action at that mark, who knows, right? You can actually feed that back to your audience, and boy, that is just like we were talking about LinkedIn Market. That audience has already read a good deal more about what your service is or what you're talking about, and it certainly does put them into another basket of qualification.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the same thing applies. I mean, the video embed itself is huge. The scroll tracking is huge. What other kind of general behaviors, and this is what we're really going into. We're into behavior tracking, not lead gen tracking. What other behaviors on a website should be really making its way into GTM listening and create them as events or conversions? Can you think of anything else right off the deck?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, even building on the click tracking, we talked about phone tracking a little bit earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And, ideally it's nice to have like some sort of a phone tracking service. There's several out there, or even some built into the platforms that'll tie a phone call to a specific lead.
Yep.
But one simple way to do some level of phone tracking, you can set up a click event to track anytime someone clicks the phone number. And that, if people are coming from mobile, they'll do click to call and that sort of thing. So it'll give you at least some idea of how many people are clicking to call.
Right. One more area of kind of mapping user behavior is really understanding the different levels of content that you have on your website. The buyer's journey we always reference, but there's awareness levels of content, consideration content, decision-making content. Can you also track not only just the visits to those pages, but can you also modify that understanding of that audience based on the amount of time they're spending, as well as any elements in those different paths, a combined grouping of clicks that actually give you a better understanding of those audiences? I know I'm getting kind of complex here, but that's
sure.
But that's the mousetrap that we all want to be able to build, right?
Yes, exactly. And there's different ways you could go about it. I mean, if you're looking to build a retargeting audience, that could be within Google Analytics itself, where you can kind of slice and dice and piece together, like you were saying. You could do people who view this page plus this page plus they spent a certain amount of time on site.
Yep.
Or Google Tag Manager has a timer trigger. So if you want to build an audience based on people that spent this much time, and you could add in like plus this page, and you can create audiences in there, and even tie that to like the Facebook Pixel, Facebook event, even some of these other platforms. So if you're doing it for Google Ads, I'd recommend just looking at what you can do directly through Google Analytics. But even some of these other platforms like Facebook Ads or Microsoft Advertising are talking about not neglecting that.
Right.
There's different ways you could send events back to those with GTM.
And we don't want to neglect our own advertisers. Forgive me real quick. We want to make sure that we recommend jumping into the newsletter on a regular basis for Edge. If you want to text to the number 22828, the word Edge Talk, you can jump right in there and get a lot of this information that we're talking about delivered right to your email inbox. Sorry for the gratuitous plug there. I just had to swing back around and do that real quick. All right, so Tim, I got a bigger question for you. We're talking about all the practical implementations. One thing in particular that we started to talk about earlier, but I wanted to swing back around to it, is getting an understanding of the site that you're advertising on. What do you say whenever you are experiencing kind of flat websites or sites that haven't been thought through to a level of measuring any of these things that we're talking about? It could very well be you've got a 5-page site with a lead form and there's just not that much depth of information to be able to track. How do you help customers or your clients deepen their understanding of the user behavior?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I would say work with any data that you have. It might be limited, but set up all this tracking I was talking about as much as you can. Look to tools like Google Analytics has some demographics where you can see some basic interests and that sort of thing. If you're looking for insights about your audience, install the Facebook pixel. You can see some stuff about your audience. Most importantly, get a plan together for hopefully building out more content on the site and building out more of a structure after you map out that funnel. And a lot of times I do like to show clients data, which kind of shows what percentage of play the landing page has versus the ads, and tell them, hey, I'll do my part to make the ad campaigns as great as they can be. But at the end of the day, it's kind of going to rely on the experience people have on the site. So really constantly pushing when I have my calls with them and such that, okay, we need to prioritize getting this fixed. And if it is something where, they have a dev team that's overbooked or they don't really have someone to work with, there's platforms out there like Unbounce that you can turn to, where you can build a templated page that looks pretty decent, and you can play with, some A/B testing, building on some of the features that you might not be able to get in on that main site if you're kind of desperate there.
Yep. Oh, that's all good information. Let me ask you this on the AdWords side of things. Data's data, and if we all of a sudden start opening up a heck of a lot of events and additional conversions that were not originally anticipated. So let's say 6 months we're rolling with just lead forms and call data pushing back into AdWords as conversion points, right? And then we actually add in these additional elements, these additional factors of conversion, and we're setting them up in GA as conversions. What does that inherently do to the ad campaign itself? Because now you're getting threefold, fourfold the amount of conversions. How's your steerage getting affected whenever all of a sudden you're 4 times as successful on that ad campaign?
Sure. So, obviously you have to have some realism and what you're tracking as a conversion. There are other ways you can set up the conversions, like the conversions that Google is actually optimizing from versus conversions that they're not optimizing from, but they're included in that all conversions column so you can see them. So you might want to do that with some of the lower funnel conversions. Off the top of my head, I think that's just like a checkbox when you're setting up the conversion. They also have a feature for conversion actions or conversion sets right now. I forget the exact wording of that, but where you can set up specific campaigns to essentially optimize around specific conversions. So you might have a display campaign where you're fine optimizing around those top of funnel downloads and such. And that's your main CTA. But then you might have a search campaign that's kind of like your core buying campaign where you really want to just optimize around those further down the funnel actual leads. And you get to just assign those as your conversion. So there are ways you can set that up. Like if you're on the social end, Facebook, also you can kind of assign a specific conversion there.
And that's very astute points right there, because if you just jam all your conversions back into the original campaign that you had without kind of breaking out some of those intent layer or staged keyword groups, then you kind of can push some false signals back to your campaign that wasn't ready for it.
Yes, right? Yeah. So there's a difference between tracking the data and having it there for your own analysis versus putting it into the system for Google to optimize around as you're getting it, right?
Right. Are there any factors, I keep on thinking almost like a point system, are there any factors of, okay, this conversion means a very important factor, a lead gen, as opposed to maybe half a point or so,
Yeah, so actually, and you may have seen this too, some of our B2B clients literally have lead scoring where they'll have the certain actions in their automation system that they use are assigned certain numbers of points, and that is actually something we take into account because they want to make sure stuff gets pushed through to sales. Right. So if someone's reading a blog, it might be 1 point. If they attend a webinar, that's 5 points. If they submit a sales form, that's 10 points, and it gets them right there, just an abstract example.
Yep.
So yes, that is, and that should be a conversation you have with your client too, as to how much they value a certain interaction. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't know. It's something you kind of have to learn and process, but a lot of times they will have at least a general idea of, someone who downloads a guide in general, this percent tend to move to the stage of the funnel, or if we get someone on the phone versus filling out a form, they're more likely to convert, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to be able to get the buy-in for your client as well and get them understanding it's not just about leads, it's about behavior. So there's a good conversation to be able to have there. I was just hoping that Google ads themselves would have some sort of relevancy factor that you can still count the conversion, but you're going to water it down a little bit as opposed to...
I would love something like that, and I think that is a big flaw in Google. When it comes to B2B in particular, where you can't always have a clean revenue figure associated with a lead.
Yep.
We do see that with a lot of our clients where you'll track conversions, but we don't have a good way of knowing whether they're good conversions or junk conversions until a salesperson talks to them. And there's not really a good way to, I guess you could feed in like a second conversion, but we still want to track that initial point. So that is something sometimes where we'll kind of switch over to keep it on manual bidding and kind of label keywords based on whether they're actually leading to good or junk conversions, kind of having some of a system for that.
Yeah.
And that does kind of get to where some of the smart features have flaws, because it just sees, a conversion is a conversion. Well, not really.
No, just as we're mapping out different intent, different behaviors, got to be able to map out a little bit more of a strata of different priorities of conversion, because it all makes sense. And if we, who knows, that may very well be developed in the future, that ads can actually be not just valued, but given a relationship to each other as well.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting.
Okay, now we're on our wish list. Yeah, wouldn't it be great if? No,
not like Google Reps.
I'm saying. All right, hey. Tim, it's very, very, very good conversation. I enjoyed unpacking some of this. I'm certain you have a number of links that we can send our audience, our listeners, some good how-tos, how to implement GTM, as well as how to map certain events that we're talking about. Yeah?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I can put together a list that you guys can share. So yeah, sure. Thanks for having me in here.
No. You're more than welcome. So you're going to be talking, you're going to be presenting some good information here coming up SMX West in February. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I'll be presenting in a session about B2B advertising. So I'll be talking about some tools and methods that you can use to identify keywords, strategies, and such that you can be using in B2B. It is kind of a niche where it can be tricky to find out what to go after, what people are actually searching for, that sort of thing. Google Keyword Planner isn't always much help. So kind of diving in a bit more and showing how to plan that out when it comes to some of these super niche B2B type clients.
Excellent. What's your experience with SMX? Have you enjoyed presenting out there?
Yeah, it's a great conference, a good group of people. They really push to actually have presentations that are actually practical and hands-on versus just people throwing out buzzwords and that kind of thing. Definitely good quality control. A really good group of people, too.
They have a good set of moderators, too. Well, we will be out there. The Edge will actually be out there this February, and we certainly want to touch base with you and
definitely
get a bite to eat or something like that. There are a number of questions we ask every one of our guests before we sign off, and I do appreciate your time today. But I do want to know what bugs you in your industry.
I would say, right now, I think the automation thing kind of hits it on the core, where it's always kind of this nuance, like how far do I want to go? How far do I not want to go? But it's just Google's nonstop, like, you have to adopt this automation. And yeah, sometimes it's good, but it's just this mindless, their reps are getting more and more salespeople and not people that are on your team.
Amen to that.
It's just a constant frustration I see from people all around the industry.
Well, yeah, I think you got a large audience of commiseration there.
Yeah.
Well, alternatively, what excites you about the industry?
I would say the constant change does excite me. I mean, there's so much to keep on top of, so much to learn. Another thing I frankly enjoy is I get to learn about so many industries.
Yeah.
Every client I get is often in a new space, and I get to learn all about what they do. I feel like I'm kind of a part of that. So yeah, definitely love that.
There is truly a learning mindset that's been happening for the last 3 years that kind of harkens back to maybe about 15 years ago when everybody was converging and trying to make sense out of everything. Now you have a whole nother level of people that truly are adopting the educator's role and selflessly as well.
Yes. Yeah. The selfless part, that's something I really appreciate about the industry is it's people are genuinely willing to share. It's not like I'm keeping my trade secrets and
Right.
my little bubble PPC chat and Twitter and that sort of thing. Highly recommend getting involved if you're not out there.
No, absolutely. So we want to make sure all of our audience tracks down Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Timothy J. Jensen, correct?
Yep.
And over on Facebook at Clix Marketing, that's CLIX Marketing. LinkedIn, Timothy J. Jensen, and Instagram at Clix Marketing. Well, can I tee up any final thoughts that you may have for that PPC advertiser that's looking to unpack and learn more about consumer behavior?
Sure. I mean, I would say just dive right into your analytics account, start poking around. Again, I'll provide some links, jump on a Twitter, ask some questions, find some articles to read. But yeah, really just get in there, start poking around. You'll probably come across questions as you start looking at the data. And Tag Manager, set up an account. If you have a site that you're able to play on, start playing with setting up some stuff.
Just do it. Just get your arm, roll up the sleeves, and start digging in there. It's fun.
Best way to
and
learn.
On top of that, absolutely. And then GTM actually has a great testing tool to be able to preview that.
Yes. Yep.
That the tags are working correctly, and that's always great to be able to see everything greenlit like that. Well, Tim, we really appreciate your time, and certainly wish you best at SMX. We'll be in there in the audience listening to what you have to say about B2B PPC. We certainly appreciate your time today.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome. All right. Don't forget to like and subscribe to The Edge on YouTube. And if you're really feeling up to it, as opposed to me, because I'm a bit under. But hey, drop us a quick review over on iTunes. We certainly appreciate the feedback. Let us know how we're doing. Sign up for the newsletter. Go over to edgeofthewebradio.com, and the newsletter sign-up's right there at the top of the page. Make sure you see all the must-see videos and much more over at edgeofthewebradio.com. That's edgeofthewebradio.com. We're going to be talking to you next week with Jay Acunzo. He's coming back for a third throttling, and maybe we'll get him back over on the DC front. Man, he was a marvel guy for the longest time. So from all of us over Edge of the Web, do not be a piece of cyber driftwood. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.